Yeah.
Okay, guys, welcome to another episode of ICO Show. Today I've got with me Nicholas Gregory. He's the founder of Commerce Block. Welcome, Nick.
Hey, how you doing?
Good. So Nick is actually in the group already, guys, and I've been following Nick for a few months and caught him up in London. Actually, we were discussing his project, and I got involved just looking at the white paper and actually helped them out with a few things. So I'm actually an advisor on this project. So full disclosure, I really like what Nick's doing, and I want to get him on the show just to kind of explain a bit more about Commerce Block. It's a little bit technical, the white papers, so it took a while for us to really try and simplify it a bit for investors to really understand the value of it. So Nick, before we jump into Commerce Block, maybe you can just quickly explain, quick 2 minutes about yourself, your background in the blockchain community, because you've been involved for quite a while in different things, and then how you got, from your background, how you got into Commerce Block.
Sure. So I'm an engineer by trade, software engineer. Kind of been doing software development for the last few years, and specifically around banking. I was working for a few banks on the trading side, building kind of risk platforms and derivatives pricing platforms. And I guess around 2012, I mean, I'd heard about Bitcoin before. I mean, most people that were technical and doing kind of Unix-based development would have seen it on Slashdot. And I guess that at the time they had like a Java implementation. And I was kind of interested by it, mainly because of the double spend. You work in banking, a lot of people have this issue where you have a book and you want to trade on it 24/7. How do you deal with like traders, both trying to trade the same instrument in different locations, part of the world?
Mm-hmm.
Now, Bitcoin, managed to solve that, and they solved it using cryptography and the proof of work algorithm, which was, very fascinating. I mean, I didn't necessarily believe in it 100%. I guess from day one, I had issue with the 10-minute block time.
Mm-hmm.
But I from a curiosity point of view, from a respecting the tech point of view, I kind of followed it afterwards. I did buy a few Bitcoin, very minor, just to understand it, and that was it. And I guess I kept on following it. I deviated a couple of years later, where I started spending time on Dash. I kind of liked the whole masternode approach originally. I guess once I understood it, I didn't like the masternode approach, and I guess I kind of moved back into Bitcoin. And when Mt. Gox happened, I was kind of baffled by the kind of negativity around Bitcoin, because just an exchange got hacked. If an exchange gets hacked for, say, shares or a gold exchange, the price of gold doesn't crash. And I thought, if anything, the exchange showed why Bitcoin is so important, in that people who lost money were trusting a third party, and Bitcoin is all about not trusting a third party. So I guess after that, I got involved in Bitcoin quite seriously financially, and just kind of became my hobby. And then around 2015, I was lucky in a position where I could leave banking, and I wanted to work full time in kind of crypto, which wasn't easy because I was basically based in New York. And if people have watched the movie Banking on Bitcoin, you'll realize New York had one of the most oppressive it was known as the bit license, but regulation in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So it was very hard to kind of work in that space. So I consulted for a few startups. But then I found myself a niche where, because I'd come from a finance background, I knew people in the hedge fund industry. I was giving a different alternative view of the way I saw Bitcoin in the world. And, I met people that were in the Bitcoin space in New York. There was quite a good community. So I ended up, kind of partnering with people in the kind of like boutique OTC space, which is essentially writing, Bitcoin software for exchanges, mainly kind of ATM operators, things like that. And that was quite interesting. And I guess Commerce Block kind of came out of that. For two reasons, really. I mean, in the OTC space, I was introduced to some African traders who were sugar traders between Africa and Argentina. And, Bitcoin was useful for them because, they had issues with their own local currency, and the volatility of Bitcoin wasn't a problem. But then the problem was, even though Bitcoin is this wonderful decentralized currency, the moment you start wanting to do real trade or any type of commerce, you're back to using a centralized system, whether that be an eBay or an Amazon. And one of the reasons was probably one of the reasons why banks, basically, or the old world, probably didn't go into Bitcoin, was because they started going on this kind of blockchain hype where R3 came out, Hyperledger. The same problem, data. If you want to associate data with Bitcoin, I mean, you put it in a blockchain, everyone can see it. And it's an issue because we've seen already how, even look at the Silk Road case, how that was basically collapsed because they were able to analyze transactions. And I think we all want privacy. And even if we're not doing dodgy stuff like the Silk Road, we want to keep our financial situation private. And that's one of the issues. So I came up with a few solutions. I posted them on the Bitcoin forums. yeah, basically using multi-sig, pay-to-script hash, shoving data in there, serving a hash. And, that kind of worked. But yeah, people from Bitcoin Core told me to try another approach. They said, rather than trying to use Bitcoin transactions as a pointer to data, why don't you validate the data? And then I think someone introduced me to the pay-to-contract white paper that was written in 2012 by Timo Hank. And it was a wonderful scheme where you can take a Bitcoin address, and now this is because it's done in cryptography. It could be any address, any
Sure.
any basically hierarchical address, and then you can use with some metadata, you can generate a new address. But then if you send that address, this new address, to say youth, you can then validate that metadata. So that means that there is no actual data stored on the address or stored in the blockchain, but you can validate data, and that can be anything. That can be your passport, that can be a bill of lading document. For the scenarios we were working, that was like an invoice. And I think that is, to me, is still one of the missing pieces in crypto, is how do we have privacy of data? How do we link data without creating basically another database, which is a lot of what these kind of like private blockchains are doing.
Yeah, so let me just stop you there for a second, because I think it's a really good point to make. And then I'm not as technical as you, so I always want to make sure that my listeners can understand it as well. But what you're saying is basically we've had this, obviously Bitcoin is a blockchain. It solves a lot of problems, but actually how we apply it to commerce is not straightforward, because first of all, it's transparent. So if we do store things on the blockchain, everyone can see what it is. That's not private. No business is going to agree to that. And if you take it off, then it's a centralized database again. So that's a problem where it's not trustless. You're relying on a third party. And so the other problem is it doesn't rescale, right? If you start adding in metadata to the Bitcoin blockchain, it slows down even more. So what you are saying with this contractor hash, which is the fundamental use behind Commerce Block, is almost like a protocol. It opens up new functionality for Bitcoin blockchain. We can still leverage the integrity of the Bitcoin blockchain because it's a very secure network, but we can actually incorporate additional features in. So it's kind of like I always say to my users, look how the internet was in the 90s. Everyone's just using it for email. No one knew what all these extra layers were going to come on top of it afterwards. And this is kind of what we're seeing now, is that people are taking stuff like Bitcoin, using these additions, like you're saying, contractor hash, and that lets you do a lot more things, leveraging the technology, but opening up a whole new space. So I see what you guys are doing almost like a protocol that on top of Commerce Block, you can actually enable a bunch more use cases for other businesses to actually use Bitcoin in a very practical way for their businesses. So maybe you can just have I got that right? Maybe you can just explain to me a few use cases that some of your clients are going to use, because we've talked already about potentially partnering with you for some of the projects I'm working on. So I'll come to that in a minute. But just is that my understanding of that right? And then how do you see that proceeding in the next 6-12 months?
Very much so. So yeah, because I have a background in the OTC space, one of our first clients, an existing client, is someone who basically wants to have a kind of like a distributed escrow. Now, one of the key things to hear, we are a smart contract, but smart contract doesn't necessarily run on the blockchain. We run it off the blockchain. And I think that's a key point to us, because, we're not sure how blockchains can scale if we have all these smart contracts running. And especially what we're doing a level of encryption where we're generating one address from a new address. And so we do that off-chain, but one of our first clients wants to use that kind of technology for like a distributed escrow. That's hopefully reducing their escrow costs. And they're basically in the kind of factoring OTC space. Mm-hmm. That's kind of like our first use case. Since we've been a bit more public about what we're doing, we've had a couple, mainly one real estate company that, are looking at the kind of like the real estate market. And obviously there's a lot of noise about real estate and crypto, but, they are of taking the mindset, well, yeah, we want to do real estate transactions on the blockchain, but people don't necessarily want to know, I think you wouldn't like to know how many real estate you own by being on the blockchain. We want a level of privacy. So for example, someone could take their Bitcoin address, and this is a kind of like a cryptographic way of solving it. So we are actually chain neutral. So we support mainly Bitcoin because that's where the liquidity is. But if you were to basically purchase a property or something in Bitcoin, you don't necessarily want that to be public. So what we would do is we'd have the address, we'd potentially maybe take the transfer title deeds, and from that to generate a new address and then complete the transaction. And basically, therefore, you would have the transaction on the blockchain, but you would have no understanding what it was for. But if there's ever dispute later on, they can validate that against the original document. So that gives you your proof that the property transfer or the property transaction happened. And those are the kind of use cases we're looking. And then once you start opening up this associating data, it's kind of endless. I mean, one of these people we're talking to that want us to use for kind of trade finance, they said, okay, trade finance, great. how we start dealing with the volatility of Bitcoin, then you start being able to create, derivatives on the stuff. And, so a lot of what we've done is taken existing research, had it peer reviewed, and then implemented it. So a lot of stuff, like for example, contract to hash was implemented. The paper was actually written in 2012. We went through the process of building an implementation, and then we actually went through the process of generating a BIP so that the Bitcoin community could peer review it and basically accept it. And, they found issues with our original implementation. They found some security holes. We fixed them, and they eventually gave us we're in draft status. So our BIP is 175. So we're kind of excited from a techie point of view. I think that gives us a lot of credentials because, I can talk to you about a lot of stuff. I can make a lot of claims. Until it's peer-reviewed research, it's vaporware.
It's theory.
So
it's vaporware, but even if it's legitimate, it's all theory. So I want to make that distinction. With what you guys have done is actually you have a working product. It's been, code's been developed for a while. It's been reviewed, by pretty, important people in terms of, credibility in the community. So I've seen, you've got now UX on top of that. You're having clients actually beta test it. Very, it's there, it's real. And I think with a lot of white papers, like you say, if it's just theory, you don't know how long it's going to take to actually get past all that stage to creating real world value. So one of the biggest challenges as an ICO investor, I'm trying to work out when is this project actually going to generate some value in terms of, when does it become useful? So you guys already have a code, you already have a UX, it's a real product. You already have some clients starting to, use it and partner with you. What is the value of the token for investors? Help me understand that part of it. So, obviously partners are going to need to have your token, and what other use cases or utility value as an investor does holding your token give me?
Well, as a token, I mean, for start, the way we're running these smart contracts is they're off-chain transactions, off-chain smart contracts. So they're going to be run essentially, whether that's a site, it's going to run in a combination of areas, but it'll be essentially in our infrastructure. So probably a side chain with a combination of multi-sig. We're looking at Lightning. Again, that's, opens up a lot of use cases. We've basically done a lot of research in the derivative space where you can use that. We've referenced that in white paper, how we can do derivatives in Lightning. But essentially, these smart contracts will be run in our infrastructure. You're going to need this token to basically create these smart contracts. And that's a key thing. However, this is a network token. It's not necessarily a utility token. Anybody can basically take our infrastructure, basically create a new smart contract, potentially even run it themselves, and they would basically be paid for doing that in the CBT, which is the name of our token. So I think if you're going to basically build a token, you can't just be like an Amazon.com and create a token and coming back to a centralized system. You have to be honest with yourself and say, well, if you want the network to grow with your partners, it could grow to the point where there are people running infrastructure using your token that are bigger than you. And that's very much the way, Bitcoin grew. I mean, obviously, the first days of Bitcoin, there was one miner. That's why Satoshi has 1 million coins. Obviously, people took over and are now generating and owning those. And, we're building this open source. We expect people to come and basically look at our token. And if, with the network effect, which we think we'll have by our original clients, our original use cases, that's where we think that the token will gain value. And, we can't build every use case for contract to hash. I mean, there's a plethora. And I think by building the reference implementation, having live clients, we set the stone, and that kind of keeps CBT valuable. And I think that sees its potential growth. So I think this is what a network token means. We're a network layer on top of existing protocols. Those protocols being, Bitcoin, Decred, which I like, Ethereum, whatever. But that's how a network token should grow.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So you guys are potentially blockchain agnostic because you don't just tied to Bitcoin. You can also work with Ethereum or other blockchains.
Yeah.
And the value of the token, if other people are building apps on top of your sidechain, essentially, then the demand.
Or basically building new sidechains. So we'll have a sidechain that basically does, real estate transactions, some trade finance. We also do derivative stuff. But we can't cover every use case. But we are going to have the SDK. We do. As people want to add use cases to it, we want to incentivize people to use our CBT. So potentially, if this is successful in a few years' time, maybe we only have 10% of those services. I mean, if you're building a network token, that's the way you've got to think, and that's the way it should be.
Have you heard of Icon in South Korea? Because they're running a very similar kind of project where they are kind of like almost like a protocol layer, and they're supporting universities and hospitals, and these are all like side chains or even private chains that their token is like the backbone, if you like. And it sounds like what you're saying is that your token is going to support all these other use cases that will emerge, but they will all need to use CBT token to kind of communicate.
Yeah, I mean I mean, we have lots of logos inside us, but Bitcoin is decentralized currency. We want to decentralize finance. The customers I speak to, is the issue they have with blockchain is there's no real fintech solutions. We have cryptocurrency, we have smart contract tools, but a hedge fund, a property company, a trade finance group, they want fintech services. They want a token. Yeah, they're happy with a token, but they want solutions, not necessarily technology thrown at them. So that's our vision, and we're from that background. I mean, I worked in banking where I built big trading systems, but we always had fintech solutions to connect to the exchanges to do our order management, and that's where we are. And we think it's a huge space, and I think it's what's needed because I want cryptocurrency not to be a store of wealth. I want actually to be seen. I want it to be used day to day, not just a speculative instrument. And I think the only way to do that is to bridge the reality of where we are today and where crypto is now. And if you can incentivize people to basically basically fintech solutions, it makes it very easy for people to look into that direction. Because when I've gone and spoken to funds, people that are looking at using us for like generating a hedge fund, they don't necessarily want to know the details of Lightning. Side chains,
technical nerds. They just want to know that it works and it's secure.
And these people are technical, but they just don't want to get into the nuts. They want me to get that, or they want our Commerce Block to do that, and they want a fintech solution for that. And that's where I think we're a big situation. I think we have a big opportunity here. And, in terms of our competitors, I think it's really is people like Hyperledger and R3, because I think the contract to hash kind of negates the need for private blockchains. And I strongly believe in that.
Okay. I'd love to get into this a bit more. I know your time is a bit tight, and I definitely want to cover some of the token economics. So that's something I've worked with you on, and I want to make sure people are clear on that. So could you just give us a quick overview of the ICO? When is it happening? How do people participate? And in terms of, how much is available, do you have a whitelist? Is there like individual caps? What's the sort of token distribution model? Has that all been sorted out now?
Yeah, so we're working with the regulators because, long term, we want to work in the fintech space, and that's important for us. So our cap is 25 million. But that's we price things in dollars, so we probably won't get that with various discounts and pre-sale, etc.
Sure.
We are talking in pre-sale at the moment. We're giving 40% away. I think we're keeping 30% for partners. So I think to incentivize people building applications on top of us using that, we want to basically incentivize them with tokens. We've taken that model from that's a well-known model. We looked at things like Civic, who have got the same model. We have Civic tokens because we're going to basically integrate with them, and I think Tyrion as well. Incentivize your customers, and that's where we are. In terms of the ICO itself, we've kind of building the platform ourselves. We're basically, again, like Civic, we've got an internal queuing system. When the money comes in, whether that be Bitcoin or Ethereum, we put it straight to cold storage. We don't want to take risks there, and then we'll basically asynchronously generate a new token.
So what you're saying is your token launch will run on your own blockchain. That's what you're saying.
It runs on our own infrastructure. That's open source. I mean, people have been asking us, can we help them with the ICO? I said, well, look at our GitHub repo. We're very transparent. We're not, I think that's the way to be. So people are free to come look at our GitHub repos and find bugs. We'll give you a bug bounty, but that's where we are. In terms of whitelist, yes, we will, because my understanding, and I've been working with the regulators, that we should basically do an AML on any address to make sure it's not being used for illicit purposes. In terms of KYC, I think there's regulation that says any amount over 15,000 euros or 10,000 euros should be KYC'd. We haven't decided if we're going to do that. Maybe we'll just limit it. It really depends on the community feedback. But regardless, if people wanted to make bigger transactions, they could contact us directly, as long as you're open to sending your passport and personal details, because this is stuff we need to be regulated and work with a bank. We don't want to be one of these ICOs that raises money and then can't have a bank account or can't function like a normal business. I think that's a bigger issue, a bigger risk to the ICO and to owners of tokens.
So we've talked together about all the legal, stuff you have to figure out. So I understand you're doing a lot of research in that space to make sure you guys are really set up correctly, and obviously, doing that due diligence to make sure you're not stuck at the end, like you say. That's really, really important, and I think you've done a really good job with that so far. Is there a fixed date for the ICO yet, or do you guys are still doing more research before you're comfortable to put a date on that? Or
we're definitely looking early November, barring challenges. In terms of a lot of this is more around the regulation. What can we do? For example, I think you may have mentioned using Civic. Civic won't support proper KYC till the 20th of October. So that puts a huge risk if you have to use them. Yeah. So at the moment with Civic, you can just basically, they'll validate your email. But if you want to basically upload your passport, and then the bigger issue is if we were to use Civic, is the regulators going to be happy with that?
Yep.
Because Civic, we don't know. So, but yeah, we're definitely aiming for early November for sure.
And when you say regulators, just want to clarify, you guys are based out of London, incorporated there, and everything. Is that the structure, or?
We're basically the ICO is going to be based out of Gibraltar.
Okay.
But we're working with it. We're based in London, but again, there's a regulatory body in Gibraltar to do this.
Okay.
So you can just go to Gibraltar and just do an ICO, but we want to have a local bank account there. So when I say regulation, what do we need for a bank to respect us and actually open an account with us and make us be a normal company? And I think that's a big thing.
Yeah.
Because that's a huge thing. So a lot of what I'm telling you is what the banks in Gibraltar have stipulated, and then we're looking at potentially getting one of the Gibraltar DLT licenses as well, which are coming out on the 1st of January, because that would allow us to basically do more complex use cases. And
yeah, so I think you're really looking forward in terms of, like, there's a lot of jurisdictions that are being more open, and I think you've done a lot more research than most people I've spoken with to make sure you guys actually have a good roadmap you can actually execute on in terms of these use cases. You don't get stuck down because of regulation. That's really important as well, in terms of value creation.
Yeah, and what we like about Gibraltar it seems like the place is very much a test bed for what's going on in London. So there's a strong relationship there. And as London decides how to deal with this new world, it seems that Gibraltar's taking a stance and doing things proper. So you're kind of safe in that level.
Very interesting. And your team's based in London, also Israel. Just tell us a bit about where you guys, who else is working on your project?
So my co-founder is Omar. Very strange, but we knew each other in New York. We both decided to move to Europe about 5 months ago. He moved back to Israel. He's from Israel. And it just so happens that the team is probably arguably 50-50. Omar may move to London. We're not sure. The issue is Israel's been a really good place for finding people. The resources are pretty great. It's obviously there's a lot of research there in crypto. So it's kind of worked out well. But, I think in this world, you focus less on location, but where the good people are. And, we've managed to, there's a lot of talent in Israel. It's similar time frames. There's a big crypto community. So we'll see on that. But the company will be based in London. I'm definitely not leaving.
Okay, good to know. So I'm very conscious of your time, and we're going to wrap this up. But I really appreciate, Nick, you coming on the show. If our listeners have any questions, you'll be inside the group as well, so they can reach out to you. Any last things you want to mention in terms of what you guys are up to or what's coming next? Or I guess we'll see you inside the group.
Yeah, I mean, we're very much into crypto. So anyone that wants to bug me about questions, I frequently do talks in London around niche stuff like segregated witness, Lightning. Feel free to come to our Telegram chat and ask that. Myself and the other guys will talk crypto all day and probably bore you to death. We're very excited. I mean, our project is very much about taking existing research and implementing it. Today, I was at a research facility in London where there's quite a few PhD guys from Cambridge. They were basically showing us our research and coming up to us saying how we could implement it. And that's our model. We take existing research that's been peer reviewed and we build products from it. We're not going to promise something that's impossible with big question marks. And I think, for us, that's worked in the past. And I think we're very excited about that. And I think, we love this space and, we're very excited. So.
Yeah, I can personally say I've learned a lot from Nick just from spending time with him, the conversations we've had, and it's rare to find a founder who has such deep technical knowledge. And a lot of times they can, white papers and projects can promise you the earth, and then after the ICO, you're like, oh, how are we going to actually deliver this? And they work that out afterwards. So you guys are kind of the opposite. You definitely don't overhype, overpromise. You work with stuff that's peer reviewed. You work with what you have, and then you try and build a product on top of what you already have.
Yeah, I mean, we were around, I guess. The ICO's boom has only been a few months, so I guess we're a bit older than that. I mean, I guess we're a 1-year-old company, which is kind of like a granddad company in this space. So, so we're very much taking that model, and we're not going to change. We're still anything we put out, we are going to be peer reviewed. And for those who haven't gone through it, it's not pleasant. Yeah, random people around the world tell you that your stuff could do with enhancements, but we are dealing with people's money here. I think this is crypto. If we make a bug, there's especially around cryptography.
Cool. Okay, Nick, appreciate your time. I'm going to let you run, and we'll post this up inside the group. If anyone has any questions, they can obviously get back to you. Thanks a lot again, and we'll talk again soon when you're near your ICO.
Okay, thank you. Cheers.
All right, cheers. Goodbye.
Thanks.